So that we always walk in the path of justice, in the path of love, and the path of charity to one another. Help us with thy grace. We do only those things that will promote the unity, the happiness, and the prosperity of Nigeria. Amen.
Abraham Marco, Director General, Debt Management Office.
Director of Finance and Strategies and SPC,
Yes, I do. Group Manager in Corporate Finance.
I gave back to the coordinating director of FIRS.
I don't know, special advisor to the Chairman of FIRS.
Peter Henna, coordinating director of Services FIRS.
Okay.
Senator Solomon Adiola Olamileko, represents the largest senatorial district in Nigeria in terms of population. I am from Lagos State, Lagos West Senatorial District. Good morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, our guests. My name remains Yusuf Abubakar Yusuf, Taraba Central.
My name is John Owen Eno, Cross River Central.
Good morning, my colleagues. Invited guests. My name is Umar Kupi from Kaduna State.
Mr. Chairman, invited guests, I am Senator Nelson Efion, Kwai South.
To this session on the revenue projections for the 2016 appropriation bill that is before the National Assembly. We at least expect that each of the agencies will be led to this session by the head. The only communication we've received is from the NNPC, where we note that the Minister of State and Group Managing Director it's going to be unavailable. I mean, we're hoping that the Minister of Finance will join us. We're hoping that the Minister of Budget and National Planning will also join this session as it proceeds. There was no introduction from the Budget Office. We're hoping that the DG Budget will also be here. There was no introduction from the Office of the Accountant General of the Federation. We are not going to make any strong statements yet. I mean, we're just going to proceed with those that are before us, only because we just think that this work should go ahead. I mean, we should make every effort to see that there is no delay. We have benefit in terms of the extension of the implementation of the 2015 budget to March 31st. What we would like to happen is that by March 31st, we don't have a new budget. So we're going to make every effort on our part to assist the process to run, and hoping that those who are not yet here will join us. Of course, we've had this session before when we were dealing with the medium-term expenditure framework and the fiscal strategy paper. We considered these same issues on revenues, but I think that increasingly, since after the passage of that document, since after the estimates were laid before the joint session of the National Assembly by Mr. President. There's an increasing need that this session holds again. If there are any doubts at all about of the expenditure for government, so this session is really, to either invalidate raising these revenues, to support their case again. I've been too conservative, and that within the last couple of weeks and months, there is, and as practical as possible. It's a lot of the times in the course of implementing a budget, but at this level and point, we need to try as hard as we can to be as realistic as possible. I mean, I give an example, and I'm sure we're going to listen to NNPC. The budget before should the National Assembly stick by $38 in spite of what the present realities are. And if we have to stick by that, why? I mean, we need to know all these things so that we can take our decisions about what best we can do. I know that the committee is going to engage with the CBN in terms of the exchange rate, which as at now is 197, and we know that in the parallel market it's more than 300. A lot of opinions indicate that the gap is way too wide, whereas we know that the exchange official may not have to be chasing that of the parallel market, but is there something that we can do, in the face of where we are? So that's why we are here. I mean, it's as a committee, we have our own MDAs that should appear before us to defend their various budgets, but we also have the additional mandate to have this engagement on the revenue assumptions for the budget. So let me welcome everyone. Let me also welcome the Honorable Minister of Finance, who has joined us, for this session. And if you have our agenda for this meeting, the first presentation actually is supposed to be made from the Federal Ministry of Finance. That's what we have. I mean, maybe without being specific, we need some general thoughts about, how the committee should approach this. We're going to look at the specific cases when we go to the other areas, NNPC, Federal Revenue Service, Customs, debt management, in terms of what we are supposed to borrow, in terms of, the sustainability of that. I mean, as much as the DMO has always tried to relate to the fact that in terms of international comparability and all that, we're doing well. But when you look at the local domestic situation, where we are told, the IMF boss was here some time ago, that indicated that for every 1 naira the country earns, about 37 kobo is forfeited in terms of servicing of debts. So we need to we need to be able to look at that and look at the further implications that it has for us. Again, welcome, while I will listen to the Minister of Finance. Thank you.
Chairman of the various boards and corporations. I want to thank the chairman of the committee for convening this session, which I think is very important to explain not only to the Senate, but to the wider public, the assumptions and the thinking behind our revenue projections. We believe that we have done a very much a data-driven analysis of what is realistically achievable. And that is based on certain macroeconomic assumptions, a macroeconomic framework which will then drill down into at the micro level and drill down then again to the individual revenue collecting agencies. And we engage in a fairly robust process of second guessing ourselves on some of the assumptions and making sure that indeed these revenue projections are attainable. I think the other thing to say is around the resource requirements to actually attain these revenues, and we've tried to build those also into our budget. So if you don't mind, I'll just take you a summary level through the paper that we presented on the macro level, and then just drill into some of the key assumptions. I won't speak for NNPC specifically because I believe they're here, but I will speak at a high level on our assumptions around customs, around IRS, and around the independently generated revenues. I'll just give that background, and then I think your questions will probably lead the debate and allow the various agencies to present. So we made certain macroeconomic strategies and projections, and we believe that we are going to see a GDP, our target is 4.2, and we believe that within that, with our strategy to diversify the economy, there will be different revenue sources for the government, and those revenue sources we believe are extremely collectible. Let me talk a little bit about IRS in particular, because IRS has a fairly aggressive target. From our analysis, the problem with IRS is compliance. We believe that at the moment, the majority of those who should be paying are not paying. So if we improve our compliance, improve our collection strategies, we believe there's additional revenue to be collected by the IRS across all its income heads. And I know that the chairman is here and he will speak, I'm sure, about the specific strategies that IRS will deploy to generate those numbers. The question that's being asked is, in what has been a slowing economy, is it realistic to assume that you will actually collect more? The answer is yes, because you have companies, and we have the data to support this, who haven't paid any tax in 7, 8, 9 years, and nobody has asked them for any tax. So we believe that even though that there'll be a slowdown in current, there'll be an increase in arrears and penalties and fines, which must be collected because it's revenue that is due to government. In addition to that, of course, there are strategies to widen the net and bring more people in. And again, this will bring in additional revenues into the IRS. Their strategy, and again, I don't want to take away from what the IRS chairman will say, their strategy, I think, is very, very realistic. And it's based on a different type of collection model. They're working very closely with the state Internal Revenue Services. For the first time, we're seeing that kind of collaboration. And as we all know, it is not us here in Abuja that have information about the schools and hospitals and little businesses in the state. It is the state IRS. So we believe that that collaboration will really close a lot of the gaps that have seen our compliance levels of tax collection as low as 20%. So that's something that has to be fixed. Creating a democracy that is based on the taxpayer is an important step as far as delivering this administration's economic objectives. On the customs side, again, we have seen some slowdown in the level of imports, but again, there are inbuilt inefficiencies in the collections that we have been seeing up until now. And the new management of customs, again, have very aggressive technology-driven strategies to increase the actual revenue collections. We are an import economy. We import 70%, we have, according to the statisticians, 70% propensity to import. Majority of what we spend is imported. The question we are asking, the question which customs will be answering is, are we getting all the customs revenues that we should be getting on those imports? And the strategies they have, and I was with them yesterday around technology, around buying scanners. We don't have a lot of the basic equipment we need to maximize our revenues in customs. And the strategy we have is to provide that equipment, provide that support. Again, we're looking at what are the reasons why the revenues are not collected. We're looking at the causes. One of the issues that we cannot escape, and we have begun to address in the Ministry of Finance, is compensation. There must be an alignment of interest. There must be performance-related remuneration within customs. We have it already in IRS, we don't have it in customs. It removes the temptation to compromise. When there's an alignment of interest, when there's a remuneration strategy that is based on collection, and the volume of collection. And we believe that by bringing that in, we're talking to one of the international management consulting firms around doing a very fast compensation survey, looking at the compensation of customs officers, and in particular looking at performance-related pay, because we believe that that will bring an alignment of interest, where every no customs officer will have any incentive to compromise, because he will be losing not only his bonus, but he will also be risking prosecution. So we are going to have that alignment, and we believe that with that collection strategy again, customs will be able to achieve all of their targets. In addition to which, we are looking very closely at the issue of duty waivers. We have quantified how much has been lost, quote unquote, to duty waivers. We set up a fairly high-level committee to look at duty waivers. What is the financial cost to duty waivers? What is the benefit of duty waivers? And where we feel that there is no economic case for continuing with duty waivers, we should be making appropriate recommendations to stop this and to align them with our objectives to ensure that, and again, this is all towards maximisation of revenue. On independently generated revenues, we have looked at the potential sources there. As you know, we have already started the process of ensuring compliance with the Fiscal Responsibility Act. A number of agencies are already in contact with us around their targets for crediting to the Consolidated Revenue Fund. Many of these have never credited anything into the Consolidated Revenue Fund in the past. We're now having very active discussions with them around that. And I believe that the budgeting process and the audit process that is ongoing will also support that. The second thing to say around independently generated revenue relates to the TSA. As you know, there's roughly 2.2 billion or 2.2 trillion. It changes on a daily basis because, as you know, agencies are spending and revenue is coming in on a daily basis. But the consistent trend line revenue is around the 2.2 trillion mark. Of that, we're now doing a reconciliation to identify what does that balance represent. Some of it obviously has commitments and liabilities against it, but some of it actually represents accumulated surpluses that should have gone to the Consolidated Revenue Fund from past years, which was never credited. We believe those revenues will come in and form part of the independently generated revenues of government. The other recovery that we're expecting quite considerably is we're looking at both pensions and salaries. We have identified that there's been a consistent overpayment of pension contributions. We have put a team together now to go and start recovering those overpayments because we have identified some I won't call them ghost workers, some inflation in our payroll. Of course, that inflation also translates into the pension contribution. But those monies can actually be recovered, and we're working on recovery. So those also form part of the independently generated revenues of the federal government. So that's an overview. I think I should stop now to allow you to interact directly with the various agencies. Sorry, I didn't introduce my team, and I should have, and I apologize.
Your team introduced.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Introduced before you came. I think we should reserve them and see whether we relate those questions to the specific submissions that each of the agencies is going to make. So the Ministry of Budget and National Plan is not yet here. So we're going to move on to NNPC. We'll listen to your, one of the things I think that we also like NNPC to talk about is the more than 1 trillion that is in the fiscal strategy paper that is going to be committed to cash calls in terms of cost. I mean, we'd like you to relate that to what was paid out for 2015, and give the committee justification why that amount must still be committed for that purpose. Because the committee is determined to make sure that that amount is not approved. So we need to be sure and we need to be convinced. Because in the budget, the total contribution from oil is about 800 billion, and yet we're paying out 1.something trillion for cash call. I mean, we need a clear justification of that, and we need that in the course of the presentation you're going to make. Thank you, NNPC.
I'd just like to touch on the world outlook for oil and gas. NNPC has been monitoring what has been happening in the oil and gas industry worldwide. And currently, the situation at the clock where we have countries producing oil and a lot of oil being stored currently. So there's a lot in the market, and it's being reflected in the price. And you notice between December and to date, the price actually went down quite a lot, and we're going to below $30 per barrel. However, the market corrected itself as soon as it went slightly below $30. And I think that gave an indication that the market understands that oil below 30 is not sustainable.
2.05.
The market found back today to $30 per barrel. The situation also is that the winter in the northern hemisphere has been very aggressive this year, very bad, which is good news for oil producers. That is also helping with the oil price worldwide, and that's helped to push the price back up to where we are today, $33 per barrel. Our projection and that of most of the analysts worldwide is that by Q2 or Q2 of this year, the oil price should go back to well above 38 or the region of 38 barrels, that's $30 per barrel. And towards the end of the year, the most conservative projection for the end of the year we're hearing would be that the oil will not go way below, will not go below 40. So we're still very confident that the current price that we have put of $38 per barrel is attainable, comfortable, can be attained, and sustained for the budget. The other plan that was arranged, which never took place, was a meeting between the OPEC and non-OPEC producers, the heavy producers, to see how arrangements can be reached to manage the market. However, this meeting was not successful, and this has led to a drop in price that you saw in the past few weeks. The other economic indices that we're focusing on that giving us confidence on this $38 per barrel price is the growth of India. The economic growth of India surpassed the expectation, and we also expect it to continue to grow. Even though China has slowed down a bit, there's also the belief that most of the European economies will also grow this year. And with this, it means demand for more oil, and this should end the budget year of 2016.
Okay.
I'm happy to say from the beginning of this year to date, our production has averaged 2.206 barrels per day. 3,000 barrels, which had a temporary security constraint while it wasn't produced, but we expect that to clear this week, and so we're going close to a higher level. But we are comfortable to maintain the 2.2 million barrels per day production because we're already hitting it now, and with all the additional efforts and the reforms taking place in the oil and gas sector, we expect this to be sustainable. Of course, the risk is still there, of the security risk in the country in that area, and that's why we will want to remain and stay by our figure of 2.2 million barrels per day. As far as the gas is concerned, the gas production is also doing well. But yesterday, we had 7.7 million scf per day of gas production across the country. 7,746,000 million scf per day for gas production. So this is very positive, and we are comfortable with these projections that we have given in the budget, that they are sustainable, and there are huge opportunities to grow production, which we are working on. And that brings me to the issue around the cash call for the oil and gas industry. As you very well know, distinguished senators, there are basically two major fiscal regimes we run in Nigeria. There's the production sharing contract regime, where the contractor, the IOC, is given the field to develop at his own cost. He takes his own profit up front. He puts all his money to invest and takes his own profit, takes his own costs, recovers costs, and then pays royalties at a very minimal level, between 0 to 5% to the Federation, and then pays the tax to the country. Whereas the JV venture is on the other side, the second type of fiscal regime, where both of us put money into the business, we develop the oil, and we produce it, and each party takes its own share of the oil. What the reality is that for the JV venture, this is the profitable one. On the average, the government take comes to about 63-64% of the. If you invest $1, you get about 63 64% back, cents back on the dollar. Whereas on the PSC, where the man brings in his own money, we struggle with about 32%. So what we have been saying in NNPC for several years is that we need to sustain the JV ventures. We need to invest in the JV ventures. We need to contribute our own share of funding of costs for the JV ventures. But unfortunately, over the years, the tradition has been when the industry needs on the average $9 billion to invest, we always leave, we cut them down, we always come up with about $5 billion on the average over the past few years. And in this year's budget also, it's about the same figure we have asked for to be invested in the JV ventures. Our view is that the investment of this 1.1 trillion is critical to generating the profits which we say we need to generate. There are some constraints in the industry around the security. There are some constraints also around the cost of production, which the new team in NNPC and the ministry have been working on to ensure that we reduce the what we have in the budget, which is called T1, T2, the operation cost and the capital cost, which is put currently at $26 per barrel. There's a major project we're working on now to bring that down across the industry to make sure that the profit we make on the oil is a lot more than is required. Now, the explanation for the cash call of 1 trillion to the revenue does not change the formula of the profitability. What is happening currently is that because over the years we have not invested in some what we call integrity projects. These are projects like pipeline that is taking the crude oil to ensure that they are repaired and maintained to avoid spillage and damage to the community. Some of these projects have been behind in terms of funding, and a lot of this money will go into that to ensure that the integrity of the pipeline. So the way you should see this 1 trillion compared to the 800 million distinguished senator is investing for the future, investing into the future, and see some element of it relates to capital investments where the returns will come in future, and the returns will actually be much more than the amount invested for this year. So I agree with you, looking at it, comparing 1.1 trillion with 800 might not be clear, but the difference is that part of that relates to capital projects which are necessary to generate future revenues into the future, and they will come back to pay itself back. On the whole, NNPC is very comfortable with the figures. We think we're going to surpass both on the production side. We are also hopeful on the price side, and also we are working hard to reduce the cost so that at the end of the day, the business of oil for the Federation will be a positive one going forward. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. You're all welcome, to this session. The Minister of Budget and National Planning, actually, the Accountant General of the Federation, has also joined this session. Welcome. I think before we move on,
colleagues, well, my question goes to NNPC. We have listened everything what we have said now, especially the oil and the gas. It's really moving very well. Is that exactly the standard that we expected? Having gone this way now, how can you obtain this sustainability? What sustainability? And if possible, how do you improve on this? Because so far, so good. So we want this thing to be sustained, and if possible, improve over it. Because actually, the problem now, we rely heavily now on this oil. But if oil now can do well, then that will be another bonus for us. Because we are not relying on oil, but now that we have started picking up, what assurance, what guarantee do you have so that you sustain this, and if possible, improve on this production, especially oil and gas? Thank you very much.
You just know the questions.
Yeah, just to
my question will move from the Minister of Finance to the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation. Now, Mr. Finance, let me commend and salute what you have been able to do for this country within a short while, most especially in this most trying and challenging economic times. And also, I want to listen to you with rapt attention as to what have been put in place in trying to see that the economy of this country try or working so hard to see that you jumpstart it and see that it doesn't go down. Just today, we listened to the Central Bank of Nigeria, who informed this country that they have injected into this economy over 2.2 trillion naira. Well, we listen with rapt attention that you are trying to use the treasury, single treasury account to reduce drastically the funding gap of 1.8 trillion naira. We have also listened with rapt attention at one of the forums and a major newspaper where we are informed that the funding gap has increased to 3 trillion naira. Honorable Minister, you agree with us that even as much as we are trying to diversify this economy, there is still a whole lot for us to do. I give you an instance on your IGR, the Independent Generating Revenue. I just left the committee now, the Ministry of Interior. In 2015, the projection for the revenue from that agency was 258 million naira. But that agency ended up in generating 1.17 billion naira. And in 2016, you still go ahead and give that same agency 215 million naira to generate. And I try to go a step further. What are these revenue generating heads that brought about the 1.17 billion? Is it that because there is a larger chunk of funds that just came in during the 2015 year? And the minister said no. He read out to us all these heads and sub-heads, informed us sources of revenue that are put to this 1.71 billion. And why, as the Minister of Finance, decide to still retain 250 million naira for this same Minister of Interior? That's not the idea. And that's just one out of numerous that we have. Honorable Minister, you spoke glowingly well about this TSA, but along the line, you raised a very good observation that some of this funding TSA might have come along with a lot of financial obligation in terms of commitment to projects and everything. But at the end of the day, there is a guesswork here that larger chunk of this fund might be money that will have gone to the consolidated revenue fund, but being retained by this agency. And I think it will not be out of place for us, because what we are trying to do here, as the chairman has said in his earlier remark, is for us to get the true position of things concerning the financial position in terms of revenue generation of Nigeria. Can you explain? And if it is extra work you have to do, we need to be saying bundled between 2.2, 2.3. A spreadsheet of what you tell us how much of this is committed and how much of this is from the money that ought to come to the consolidated revenue fund account. So that while planning our borrowing, we can be carried along. So that we'll be on the same page with you. It will not be that you tell us that this is what you're looking at without necessary documentation to show further. Honorable Minister, I also listened to you when you mentioned about the compensation of the custom. Well, how true it is that they have not been compensated in the past, we don't know. For us to join you in this transaction, which I also joined the school of thought that we go down well with the Nigerian custom and also try to, so I said, level of compromising to reduce further. We would need a detailed explanation regarding this, so that we can be on the same page. Even if there are also some financial implications to that, we have invited an international financial institution to do this. We will be much interested at this committee level to know what you are trying to do, as what you want to see or put together as a reasonable compensation for the Nigerian custom. Mr. Chairman, while I am doing that, I will go to the NNPC, the Permanent Secretary, Nigerian Petroleum Corporation. You have informed this committee that you want us to stay glued to the $38 per barrel, that we should not exceed any fear, that you are so sure that along the line, Nigeria, the oil prices will go up. You have also justified your argument that the winter situation in other parts of the world this year is responsible for what we are. So as soon as that goes away, prior oil prices will also go up. And also, you will not inform this committee that the coming on board of Iran back into the oil market, what are the consequences as far as the oil prices are concerned? You will not inform them. Two, you made mention of two sources of financial regime in NNPC. You talked about the joint venture agreement, and you talked about the IOC. And I'm fully aware that what most of these oil companies are owing us in terms of royalty runs to several millions of dollars. Can you inform this committee how much of this fund you have recovered from royalty to the coffers of the federal government, and how much are outstanding, and what is your projection, and what you are putting together this year to ensure that this money come back into the government coffers? Lastly, while rounding up, you made mention to us that the production level of 2.2 million we are trying to get, we are getting to the target or so. But you've not informed this committee what is the cost of providing or producing 1 barrel of oil. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you. Please.
Thank you. From NPC is listening.
Yeah, yes, go ahead.
All right.
Go ahead.
Yes, when the chairman made his opening remarks, I don't know whether you listened to him, he said that we use $38 as a benchmark in the budget.
Yeah, that's okay.
Now, with just as my colleague has said, with Iran coming in so desperately, and Saudi Arabia being so stubborn, now even the most volatile market you can think of is the oil market. You can never predict. Even the best forecasters have failed in predicting the price. Now, what is our fallback position? We are using $38 per barrel, and we are only hoping, assuming that, as the common man in the street will say man proposes, God disposes. As supposing your hope is not realizable and it falls to 30, 28 as it's going, what is our fallback position in order to be able to implement the budget?
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Some of our agencies of parastatals that are generating their income in foreign exchange. Now what happens? Since there are no TSA, or there is no TSA in foreign exchange, so what happens? I believe we are losing some big chunk of revenue coming from that angle. I don't know whether it's CBN that will answer this question or Madam will answer this question. So that is one question. The second question is a fundamental issue. I'm aware over time the multinational oil companies are not repatriating their export proceeds as required by law to their domiciliary account open and to be operated in Nigeria. If that is the case, why have they been left up till now without repatriating their export proceeds? And I believe this will touch both royalties and all things related to export proceeds. Number 3, this question is to NNPC. NNPC, I don't know, why is it up till now your subsidiaries are not capitalized? Because I believe this is an issue that is also fundamental to the operational capacity or efficiency of NNPC. If these subsidiaries are capitalized and they become independently generating their own income, I think they will be more efficient. The other one is custom. Probably I'll wait until.
I think we'll take the responses. But let me just start off, budget. Everyone that should be here is here.
Yes.
Finance Minister. I mean, and just to get us to appreciate the fact that since the onset of democracy, really, the National Assembly hasn't passed any budget where the benchmark price, not just that, it's higher than the market price of crude. and I need us to understand this. I mean, if we insist and go with your $38, it will be the first time in 16, 17 years that we'll be doing so. And I need you all to appreciate that, for us to take that decision. And secondly, that because of that, it's the National Assembly that's going to pass the budget. The National Assembly is going to put itself in a very awkward situation with the rest of the country. How much economic sense it would have made. So we need to, I mean, the committee appreciates what the implications would be if we now agree that let's reduce the benchmark price of crude. It will have a lot of other implications in terms of widening the funding gap. I mean, the deficit figure. Yeah. I mean, we all know so. Yeah. But that's not the reason why we shouldn't take a decision. We must take that decision. And I need all of us to know so. I mean, this session is not just for us to come and insist on the figures that were put. It's a session for us to be very realistic about it. And let me tell you one of the ways my mind works. That, yes, you talk about cash call, I mean, and that most of it, if you balance out the 1.something trillion with about 800 billion that is going to be available for the budget, and that you think that the country is not making a gain, that is because of us insist, look at it as it is, and you were very optimistic about the daily oil production, and saying it's averaging at 2.2, what. In the past, what we found out is that at sessions like this kind of optimism gets displayed, just to defend what figures have come. The very next day, we get arguments to the contrary. That the average is 1.9, 1 this, to explain why budget can't be implemented. And my colleague has asked you the sustainability of this optimism. I mean, so we need to be, it may not be possible that any year at all in the last 16 years we have ever made 2.2 million barrels. So what gives us the hope and the confidence that we can now make in 2016? And I mean, most of these issues may not be strictly economic matters as much as the politics of them. And I think we need to, and I need to get everybody to appreciate the fact that the Senate President is even calling, a stakeholders meeting to talk about this same subject matter we are seated here to talk. And as a committee, we're going to brief him ahead of that. So we need to be very, and on the TSA, I think that we also need to get to a point that we must draw a line that beyond this date, no more expenditures on that account. Yes, these monies have been taken from various accounts, MDAs and all that. Yes. Yes, they are using it. Yes. But they are not also going to spend their money indefinitely. Yes. The budget year must get to a close at some point. They are spending that based on 2015 budget, isn't it? It's going to get to a close at some point. For example, by 31st March 2016, why would any agency still spend money from that account? Fresh money has to come in that will reflect the next year's budget, 2016. Because you must have a base figure to work on. You can't leave the money like that and they continue to draw from that money. You have a projection of 1.5 trillion or whatever, that you will get from independent revenue of government. Most of it is from that money. So you must have a certain figure that you're going to work on. What you have done is that MDAs, instead of going to their various commercial bank accounts to draw money, are now drawing from that central account. But they are funding a budget. I'll explain. Yeah. So, we need to get to terms, on all these issues and all that. So Finance Minister, over to you. Yes.
Thank you very much, distinguished Chairman. Let me take the TSA question first, because I think it's really important. Effectively. So, to draw a line under it, I hear you, but in practice, what we've done, which is what I said in my opening presentation, we're now starting the process, and you're absolutely correct, March is the deadline. In March, we'll be able to dimension those, but we've already started writing to those agents saying, okay, of your balance in TSA, how much is capital? How much is accumulated surplus of the past? How much is tied to maybe contractor liabilities and obligations and so on, so that we can have a picture. So that process has started, and we're engaging with the agencies from that. From that, we'll be able to 2016. With regard to the foreign exchange accounts, they're actually included under TSA. Once they're with Nigerian banks, they're included under TSA, including NNPCs. And the only ones that we're still working on now are the foreign missions who hold accounts in foreign banks. So those are the ones that we're now trying to mop up, so at least we get some visibility of those balances as well. Let me take the question on the funding gap. The figure of 3 trillion I'm not aware of. The funding gap that I know, or the deficit budget that we're trying to fund is the 2.2 trillion in the draft budget. I don't know where the 3 trillion figure actually came from. And yes, we are hopeful that some of that TSA balance will be used to fund some of the budget, which will mean, of course, we'll be able to reduce our borrowing requirement. That's the strategy on that. The issue around IGR of a particular agency under the Ministry of Interior, I don't know the specific agency, and I think
It's the main ministry.
the ministry itself generated 1.17.
Yeah.
1.17 billion.
Yes.
The Ministry of Interior.
Yes, the actual that was submitted to the committee today is 1.17 billion, while for 2015 the approved budget for revenue was 258 million, and in 2016 it was 215 million. And in 2015, the agency generated 1.17 billion naira. Honorable Minister of Interior, Laji Dambazu, appeared before this committee and affirmed this.
I think the DG budget, you need to give us details of how much Interior actually remitted in 2015.
Yes.
It's not just generating 1.5 billion. How much did they remit? And you have those figures. So you need to check, and let's have those figures in the course of this session.
So I think the other question that I was asked was about TSA, what is committed, what is free. I think I've answered that question, that we don't know. And in the interest of prudence for this budget, because we must be prudent, it was better for us to assume 0. So anything we then get is a bonus and reduces the borrowing cost. Because if we give you an estimate and it proves to be inaccurate, we'll cause a lot of problems. So we had to be very, very careful, and we're still being very careful with the TSA. Because every day we're getting contractors who have not been paid, whose money is in TSA, so we have to be very, very careful so that we don't double count money as available when in fact it's committed. So we're working on that, and there's a team in the Office of the Accountant General, that's the only job they're doing, working through every line of the TSA balances to understand what is available, what is committed. The issue around, so I think I've taken the issue around the IGR projections, and I'm sure that observation you've made is not unusual, and you're going to find it in a lot of agencies as well. In practice, I think the monitoring of independently generated revenues by the ministries hasn't been what it should have been. And we are now, it's one of the reforms that we are bringing in to really monitor them properly and understand what is your actual revenue. In many cases, we didn't even have visibility. It is TSA that has even allowed us to see how much many of them were making. In many cases, revenues were deliberately hidden from the view of government, including the National Assembly and Finance and Budget, because they have so many accounts we couldn't see. We don't know what the revenue heads are, and it was very easy to suppress. And that's one of the real benefits of the TSA, that now there's visibility. Now we can call agencies and say, this is how much you make according to our records, so now begin to account for it. And that is what is going to drive these independently generated revenues. And I'm sorry to say this, it's one of the problems of oil. You see, when oil is big, nobody looks at all these things. But now we're looking, and look at what you just said, 1.17 billion naira, it's a lot of money. But when oil is big, all we focused on was oil. But what we've got to, and I've always said this, if we didn't have oil, wouldn't we have been asking the Ministry of Interior about their revenues? Wouldn't we have been asking all our agencies, where's your IGR? Because we would have been using that probably to pay our salaries. So that is where oil made us a little bit too indisciplined, and that's what we're having to correct now with what we're doing on independently generated revenue. And that is what will make this economy resilient, such that if the oil price should go down in the future, we won't be as vulnerable as we are today, because we will have a diverse range of revenue sources. So thank you for that observation. The issue on customs and the plans, I am unable to give you the details, as I've said, because it is something we are just initiating now, and we will carry you along. But it's something that strategically, I think I should allow CG Customs actually to speak on it, but it's something that strategically we recognize there must be an alignment of interest. You cannot tell somebody to be collecting billions and trillions, you know, it's assessing customs revenues on behalf of government if there is no alignment of interest of his personal interest and the collection. In IRS, it's working very, very well. We need to bring it in to...
Is that different from the 7%?
You see, no, the 7% is the cost of collection to customs itself. We are talking about the individual remuneration structure of the officers. It is not aligned. So customs, you know, customs is self-accounting. So that 7% goes to customs. How customs then breaks it down, the moment they have a payroll structure that is very much like civil servants.
Yeah.
For a collecting agency, that is inappropriate.
Yes.
How does it work in FIRS?
They have performance-related pay. They have a bonus structure. They use their 4%.
Well, I think that is separate service.
That's separate,
They have
in terms of remunerations.
system.
Yeah,
So that's what we
they
want to now bring.
Okay.
It's essential.
Okay.
It's essential for
It's
us
clear.
to. We have to motivate these officers.
That's okay.
That is very
collect
clear.
our
That's okay.
And it's a very fundamental. So that's why we're talking to Bain and Company to come in and do that compensation survey for us. Survey customs against other collecting agencies, survey customs against other customs in other jurisdictions, and give us recommendations on the right structure for their remuneration. Because asking somebody to collect money, which is 20 times his monthly salary, you're asking for trouble. So let us align their personal remuneration with the objectives of the customs.
I can see the CG Customs nodding his head. I think it's in total agreement. Can I
allow him to speak?
No, he will speak when he makes a presentation. Okay.
We will transfer the NCC and NIPROS and the ministry. So, but what we have to do is present his budget. Then NCC is just to make